Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. And we are continuing our study of Psalms that David wrote, which have historical context attached to them. And we're leaving the book of Psalms today to go to 2 Samuel chapter 1, and just the beautiful, heartfelt song that David wrote as a lament over Saul and Jonathan. David reminds me of the great singer-songwriter tradition that we have in the English language, both in Great Britain and in the United States. You know, these singer-songwriters who just tell you their lives through their songs, and who write songs about what happens in their lives day by day. David certainly originated that tradition. His poetic output is unprecedented in human history, and it's been unequaled since he wrote it. And this one, Saul has been trying to kill him for years, and yet Saul is God's anointed. And David hasn't forgotten that. And when he's had at least 2 opportunities to kill Saul, he has refrained from hurting him at all. And he still has love in his heart for Saul, a man who allowed him to fight Goliath when it was so counterintuitive to do so, a man who brought him into his own household. He's seen Saul go from the king that was was head and shoulders above everyone else, to the guy whose mental illness tortured him and made his life, almost unmanageable. And he bore the brunt of that more than anyone did. And yet he has not lost his love for Saul. And then there is Jonathan, the love of David's life, and I mean that not in any sexual way, but the love of David's life, which he'll communicate here. We're going to read about the tender love between David and these 2 men, especially between David and Jonathan. These men are men of arms. These are warriors. David and Jonathan have died in battle, and yet they have these strong feelings for each other. We should not be surprised that these strong feelings are communicated with the tenderness that they are. When you read letters, from men at war, from the Second World War, I'm thinking of the song "My Buddy," or you read letters from the Civil War, men writing home to their brothers, to their friends, or writing to each other. So, I mean, they felt so deeply, and they loved each other so deeply, and they weren't ashamed to speak in these words. And we are not to assume that this was romantic in any way, but it is a very deep, heartfelt love, and I just want to read it to you right now. David finds out that Saul has died, and Jonathan's been killed. Saul's died in battle with the Philistines, and instead of rejoicing, instead of gloating, instead of doing a victory dance, instead of even going, whew, David is so sad, and he writes this song in the moment. David chanted this lament over Saul and Jonathan, his son. And he told them to teach the sons of Judah the song of the bow. Behold, it is written in the book of Jashar. So much to unpack there. This is a chant. This is not lyrical, probably unaccompanied by the lyre. He wants it to be taught, and it's to the tune of a song they know, and that song is written in the book of Yashar, one of the many reference books mentioned in the Old Testament. If you think there aren't outside sources mentioned in the Bible, you're wrong, because there are many of them, and especially in the Old Testament, the book of Yashar is one of them. This is the song. Your beauty, O Israel, is slain on your high places. Tell it not in Gath, proclaim it not in the streets of Ashkelon. Lest the daughters of the Philistines rejoice, lest the daughters of the uncircumcised exult. O mountains of Gilboa, let not dew or rain be on you, nor fields of offerings, for there the shield of the mighty was defiled, the shield of Saul not anointed with oil. For the blood of the slain From the fat of the mighty, the bow of Jonathan did not turn back, and the sword of Saul did not return empty. Saul and Jonathan, beloved and pleasant in their life, and in their death they were not parted. They were swifter than eagles, stronger than lions. O daughters of Israel, weep over Saul, who clothed you luxuriously in scarlet, who put ornaments of gold on your apparel. How have the mighty fallen in the midst of battle? Jonathan is slain on your high places. I am distressed for you, my brother Jonathan. You have been very pleasant to me. Your love was to me more wonderful than the love of women. How have the mighty fallen, and the weapons of war perished? There's so much here. I don't want to pollute the beauty of the language. I want to point out a couple of things, though. One is the role that the women singing in the streets continue to play. You know, we're told that the women sing, Saul has killed his thousands, but David his 10,000s, and that's what upset Saul and started to turn Saul against David. And in this song, David says, don't be bragging about this in the cities of the Philistines. I don't want the young women of the Philistines singing about this in the streets. And then he says, daughters of Jerusalem, I want you to weep for Saul. And then later, and Jonathan, and then later on when the ark is returned, you know, the girls, it's the girls in the streets that upset Michal. So there's this appreciation, this attention paid, you know, to what the women in the streets are singing about these men. You know, their recognition matters, in other words. But then there's this, you know, Jonathan, your love to, he's talking directly to Jonathan. Your love to me was more important, more fulfilling, more satisfying than the love of women. I don't doubt that he felt that way, knowing what we know about his relationship with women and his 8 wives, that the love of his life, that the person whose loving relationship was the most meaningful to him, other than God himself, was Jonathan. Maybe later on we'll devote some time to friendships in the Bible, and we'll talk about Jonathan and David's friendship because it's an interesting study in itself. Well, I will leave you with the beauty of the language and with David's distress. Thank you so much for joining us for another 5 good minutes, which has now become 8. And tomorrow we'll look at Psalm 30.